Welcome to the Growing Tall Poppies podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nat Green, and I'm so excited to have you join me as we discuss what it means to navigate your way through post-traumatic growth and not just survive, but to thrive after trauma. Through our podcast, we will explore ways for you to create a life filled with greater purpose, self-awareness, and a deep inner peace. Through integrating the many years of knowledge and professional experience, as well as the wisdom of those who have experienced trauma firsthand, we will combine psychology, accelerated approaches, coaching, and personal experience to assist you to learn, to grow, and to thrive. I hope to empower you to create deeper awareness and understanding and stronger connections with yourself and with others, whilst also paving the way for those who have experienced trauma and adversity to reduce their suffering and become the very best versions of themselves in order to thrive. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I'm super excited today to bring you our next guest on the Growing Tall Poppies podcast. It's my absolute pleasure and privilege to welcome an amazing lady who I'm completely blessed to have in my inner circle of supportive friends. She's a beautiful, beautiful lady, and we've actually only known each other for 2.5 years, but we share such a deep and special connection, and I'm delighted to chat with her today so you can all get to know my special friend, Kerry. I'd love to introduce Kerry to you now. Kerry is a qualified occupational therapist with a master's degree and over 2 decades of clinical experience. Currently, she serves as the CEO of SenseUp, an organisation dedicated to training occupational therapists and their sensory clients across Australia and now in other countries as well. She is also the owner of SenseUp Therapies, delivering sensory-based occupational therapy to children on the Gold Coast and throughout the country via telehealth. She has a specialisation in sensory education. After a decade in occupational therapy, she discovered the transformative power of sensory education, a missing piece that profoundly enhanced her practice, and becoming sensory informed expanded her professional toolkit and significantly improved outcomes for her clients. This deeper understanding and connection were felt not only by her, but also by the caregivers of the children she worked with. Kerry has a huge mission and vision. Her life's mission and heart's vision is to ensure that no sensory child ever feels misunderstood or unsupported. Welcome, Kerry. It's so great to have you here. I feel so grateful, honoured and blessed to be able to do this with you today.
Oh, thanks, Nat. And thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I also consider you a really, really good friend. It makes it that much more fun to be doing this with you.
Oh, thank you. So let's just start with you giving us a brief introduction of who you are and what amazing things you do in the world.
Well, I'm an occupational therapist. And that's been a really big feature of my life because I've always loved my work and I've always loved my career and my work as an occupational therapist. So I've been working for approximately 27 years as an occupational therapist. I've worked in England, I lived in London for 10 years, I worked there. I've worked in South Africa, and now for the last 5 years, I've been lucky enough to call Australia home. And I've been working as an OT in the pediatric space and private practice now for a good 5 years.
Fantastic. And as everyone knows, when I do guest interviews, we talk to people who've experienced trauma or adversity, and that might be a number of traumas, a series of them, or one-off. And we look at how they've navigated that experience, and then we look at the lessons and the learnings that they've had as a result of what they've experienced, and then get them to share any great pearls of wisdom so that they can help all of us move forward on our path to post-traumatic growth. So you've been brave enough to come on here and have a chat. So I'm wondering if you could share an overview of what has happened for you and what you've been through, and then we'll dig a bit deeper as we go through the episode.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've always been a very reasonably healthy person. I wouldn't say I'm a gym bunny, but I do look after myself. I eat well. And out of the blue, and in fact, it's almost been exactly 3 years now. On the 25th of May, it'll be 3 years since I almost lost my life. So I had a very rare form of heart attack. And luckily for me, I had an experienced ambulance team of first responders, incredibly experienced. And so they were able to identify fairly quickly what was happening for me and get me to hospital and get me the treatment that I needed. So that part was all a bit of a blur. And at the time, I don't think I really appreciated just how serious it was. And it was when I was in hospital that I was in the emergency room, and I saw a doctor come into the emergency. And I remember him saying, "Where's my young cardiac patient?" And then he headed over my way. And no one had told me anything at this point. And I'm thinking, oh, he's come to me. What does that mean? And then he said that I have had some sort of a cardiac episode. And I was like, but I have a chiro appointment at 3 p.m.
Of course you did think that.
I think you should cancel that. I'm like, why am I standing up at So even though the actual event of the heart attack was incredibly scary, and being carted off to hospital in the back of an ambulance and knowing that my son was at home, I think that was the most traumatic part for me, was having my son looking out the window upstairs, watching me be taken away in an ambulance. That was really hard. That was the first time I cried, actually, although we still, of course, didn't know what was happening. So following that, a whole lot of other things sort of coming up for me. So realizing that I had almost lost my life, and then realizing just how blessed I was to still be around. And I can't even explain the range of emotions. It was during COVID, so I spent a lot of the time on my own in the hospital. I was in what they consider active heart attack for an extended period. So they keep measuring your blood for troponin levels, and the troponin levels were still rising. And I had a very insensitive nurse at one point said to me, "Oh, the latest bloods are back. It's still rising, but don't worry, my dear. We're looking after you." And then she left the room. So I'm on my own, feeling a little bit overwhelmed, terrified. I'm away from my family. I've got my parents in South Africa. I'm, alone, essentially in hospital also. No one can visit me. And
very isolating.
Very
isolating experience for you.
Yeah, very isolating. But I had a moment in hospital which changed everything for me. And sometimes they often say that you have this major event. And I was lucky enough to then be presented with what I saw as an opportunity to see my future. So that happened through a much kinder nurse.
I'm glad you got a kind one.
Absolutely. Trying to keep me calm, having a chat with me. And we started talking about my work. And when I said I was an occupational therapist, she goes, "Oh, my daughter has occupational therapy, but we're not very happy with it. And I don't feel like the occupational therapist understands that, or are we considering stopping?" And I remember being a bit afflicted. I'm like, "Occupational therapy is amazing. What do you mean you're thinking about stopping?" And then she told me her story about parenting an autistic child and the sensory challenges that her child had. And for me, that was just up my street. I consider myself having a special interest in sensory, having an affinity for sensory. And it was that moment where it really came home to me just how deeply that affinity and that understanding went. Because the conversation she and I had and the information I gave her, she just started to cry. She was like, "How do you know this?" And I was like, "Well, you told me this and I know that means that. And you told me this and I know that means that." And I could kind of step it up for her and help her see the overall picture. And she was just amazed. And in that moment, I realized, oh my goodness, this is my gift. And it literally, Nat, it was one of those, I talk about white light moments. It was that profound at that moment. And the message that came through at that moment was, you will survive. The troponin levels might rise, but I will survive this. And with absolute clarity and confidence in knowing, I knew I'm going to start teaching. I'm going to teach OTs about sensory so that they can support the children better than this poor nurse's OT who didn't know what she didn't know through no fault of her own. But I knew I had a deeper level of messaging to give OTs. And so literally that was the moment I knew I was going to be okay. So everyone was around me was still in, shock and horror and worry. And I was like, don't worry, I'm fine. I'll be fine.
Come on, time to get on with things. What are you doing?
And you say that about can't get on with things because I've been known in certain circles as cowboy Kerry.
I have heard that before. Cowboy Kerry.
Amanda started calling me Cowboy Kerry because I was just ready to go. And that I didn't, things were holding me back and I was pushing forward. And a really good friend of mine, Sasha, she helped me with my initial design for SenseUp and the initial conceptualization. And she and I were an amazing team in developing this concept. And it was less than a week after the heart attack with her sitting in my bedroom with me. And she reflects back to just how frail I was. But I don't remember that. I just remember struggling to breathe still because my heart was still healing. The whole left ventricle had literally died during the event. So I was still having trouble breathing and with energy. And I was even readmitted a few times afterwards with infections and pericarditis. But I was like, hey, Sasha, I've had an idea. And Sasha, what about it? And then I was overflowing with ideas in that time. And that saved me. It really, it kept me positive. It kept those worries at bay to some degree, but it was a really, really a blessing. It was a blessing.
Wow. And I think I can't even, I got goosebumps as you talked about that then. And to have a life-changing event become your life-changing moment, it's what we hear so often. And one thing that's been coming up in a lot of our episodes lately is that whilst it's horrible in the moment and you're going through the motions and there's uncertainty, it can be such a life-changing moment in that it gives you that sense of purpose. And you go, yes, life is short. I need to do something differently. And it's brought a whole range of other gifts for you, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's also brought up the importance of the journey that I had to go on for healing after that. Because what I hadn't realized was behind that trauma were other traumas that I hadn't actually appreciated as traumas. And so it put me on a path of self-discovery, of mindset work, very, very important mindset work. It brought up so much stuff for me that at one point my husband and I separated. Again, looking back, a necessary part of the process, and we're stronger than ever now. But the path after nearly losing your life is definitely a convoluted one.
Oh, definitely.
And I had, without realizing choice points, I had to make at every point of the way. That it was messy. And if I just look back at that first year, it was very, very, very messy.
So what were some of those choice points, the key pivotal points for you that you recognize in hindsight that, of course, you didn't know at the time?
Yeah. Making the choice to look at what's happened before.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk about that in a little bit, but also making the choice to push forward with what I considered my new outlook on life, and actually taking that gift of life and seeing I don't want to say obligation, but I did kind of go, I've been lucky enough to still be here.
Yeah.
And I've got things to share. So not only would I be appreciative and grateful for the gift of life and share what I know, but I also want to just dream. Because I'd never dreamed. If someone said to me, and this is when I first started working with Hayley Kelly, and the huge change since then, because Hayley said to me, what do you want out of life? Where do you want this to go? What is your goal? What is your dream? And I was like, I don't know. I've never dared to dream. And that was a process to make that choice. And it was hard. It was really, really hard to even put myself in that space of, oh, if I can dare to dream, what would I actually want? And I had no idea. None. Because I've never dared to dream.
Wow, that's confronting, isn't it? To get that realization after going through the significant event that you'd gone through, to think, oh. And how did you respond to that thought initially when you thought, wow, I haven't ever dared to do that?
Yeah. I was like, well, then I need to find out who I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I realized I didn't know that either.
Mm-hmm. So
And
get clear on your purpose and your identity.
yeah. So I was clear on my purpose,
Mm-hmm.
but I was like Haley used to say, put on your CEO hats or your big girl panties. I'm like, oh. I realized
I don't want to.
I realized that I wanted to have everything on my terms and not show up. And she'd say to me, but Kerry, you're the best kept secret about sensory. And you can't help people and you can't help sensory children unless you put yourself out there. So I had to find a way to, through imposter syndrome and do I really know enough? And who am I to do this? And, that whole process. But the important part being that my dream to help children, she said to me, well, then how many? Put a number on it. I'm like, put a number on it. We will end up quoting Haley many times because she's been so instrumental, through not only her group coaching sessions, but also through the personal work I've done with her. Well, personal coaching, one-to-one coaching, that the big picture. And then I also went and I learned with a company called NJB Seminars, who are based in Perth and they teach around the country. And that has also been an important part of my journey. And of course, I listen to podcasts. And so I make choices every day.
Mm-hmm. And having the choice and then taking action to make the choice is another key component.
Yes, because of course I teach that as well, don't I? I teach.
Do you?
Yes, funnily enough. And especially the embodiment perspective. So from the sensory perspective with children and adults, from the interoception and tuning into how you feel, and then what's the action you're going to take on the way in which your body feels. I'm like, oh, okay. So that means that I need to actually take action.
I have to feel and make choices. Oh my goodness.
It's like, okay, so I have to feel. I mean, that was one of the first things. Because of course, if you want to dream, you've got to know what you're dreaming for. You've got to know where you're going. But to tap into that from an actual inside out perspective, and you got to know who you are. Otherwise, how do you find your intuition?
Yeah, exactly.
And then how do you trust your gut? How do you trust your intuition? And your gut is your feeling, right? That's where your feelings.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's been a journey and so many more layers than I ever expected. And I've had to make a choice not to race.
Cowboy Kerry.
Now I know what I want. I want it now.
Yes. And I know that, a lot of the people that I've been speaking to and that message me on a regular basis are those high achievers. And you want everything now. You don't want it yesterday. And that impatience can really slow us down.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do a daily meditation practice to assist me with that as well. And, some days I wake up and I'm like, I just want to sleep a bit longer. So I wouldn't say it happens every day, but more often than not, I know now the power of starting my day centered and aligned. And that was my word for 2024, was alignment. So not only choosing opportunities, because of course, when you start putting yourself out there and growing into a tall poppy, do come your way. And in the beginning, you want to take every opportunity. You can't imagine not taking every opportunity that comes your way, but making those choices where opportunities are aligned with my dream outcome and it being a dual outcome, of course, because it's my calling. I was saved to help children, to help OTs, to help the children. But at the same time, I was also called to live my best life.
Absolutely. And I guess one thing that just came through for me then was this hope that you had all this sense of urgency because of what's happened. Life is short. I want to do it now. But you had to counterbalance that with, but hang on, you've had a heart attack. You need to be safe in how you move forward and not put yourself under too much pressure and stress and not overstretch yourself. So how did you navigate that challenge? Because I can imagine Cowboy Kerry, that would have been her biggest struggle.
Very uncomfortable. That was very, very uncomfortable for me because, of course, to grow a business in the online space also required a lot of upskilling and a lot of learning around business and finance and accounting and, all of that stuff, marketing, Facebook, socials, all of that was incredibly uncomfortable. And, with that learning process of being consciously incompetent was incredibly hard because I'd been so unconsciously competent for so long in my field.
Yeah.
And I was stepping out. So not only did I have the challenge of trying to make sure that I was keeping myself safe and trying to manage stress levels, but I also had this very uncomfortable part about learning new things. And that was when the mindset work was incredibly important for me because the strength and the fortitude and the determination on its own isn't necessarily a good thing.
No,
It
definitely.
causes high levels of stress and is counterproductive and counterintuitive.
Absolutely.
I didn't know that. And that's been a process in itself to actually appreciate that. And I'm just having a moment right now where I'm like, gosh, that's been hard. And even to say that and to accept that I can't just do anything I want because I used to be able to push, not in a hastily way necessarily, because that makes me uncomfortable, but I could work 7 straight days. I did a 2 years master's in 1 year when I was in South Africa.
Of course you did.
Of course I did. I was like, when I was working with the university, they said that they would sponsor it if I got it done in 1 year. I'm like, okay, it's for free in 1 year. And I would work in these batches of like 7 straight days and then collapse for 2 weeks. And of course, I can't do that now. And if I even start to feel unwell with a cold or recently another bout of COVID, then I need to look after myself immediately. So then I work from my bed.
Yeah, you don't quite rest all the time, do you? You keep working.
It's an ongoing process and an ongoing set of choice points. And it's not an exact science for me. It's still a daily challenge where I need to remind myself to exercise and eat healthily and find that balance because my natural tendency is to just go.
Keep busy and just keep doing and doing and doing. And I think they're really important points that you've raised because I know, a lot of our listeners are moving into post-traumatic growth and we know that it's not a one and done. You do it, you learn your lesson, you move forward and you feel better and bang, I'm in post-traumatic growth and that's where I'm going to stay. There's constant learnings. There's other stuff that happens in our life. There's challenges, there's health challenges, there's physical challenges, there's all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Life happens, but it's how we cope with that. And like you said, the choices we make on a daily basis that will move us forward, might move us back every now and again, but we can keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've now accepted that I still get chest pain fairly regularly. I've been readmitted many times for monitoring and to have more angiograms and to check everything out. So there's some regular reminders every day for me, have I got my meds in my bag when I go out?
Yeah.
So and it's having the confidence to still go out.
Yes, I imagine that would be
and like goes on holiday out of the country to somewhere like Bali, where I'm like, what if it happens again? Because there's a 20% risk recurrence of what I've had. It's called a SCAD, a spontaneous coronary artery dissection. Very common in women my age, menopausal, and the chance of recurrence is high. So then I know when I can't go jumping on trampolines, I can't go to the roller coasters with my kids anymore. I'm not meant to run and can't let my heart rate go over 100. There's all sorts of limitations that some days I just feel like I'm too scared.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I'm going to be brave. And then other times I almost forget. And then I've booked a trip to Bali and I'm like, what if I end up in hospital and they do the wrong thing because scared is so unusual? And do I have all my medical records with me? And what am I doing? Should I be going? You know, and then while I'm there, for moments that I'm completely forgetting and almost like remembering who I am in the inside.
So this ongoing sense of uncertainty and anxiety still hangs over you.
Of course.
Yeah.
So it's again a choice point where I can sit in bed with my book, and don't get me wrong, sometimes I stay with my book for a couple of days because I just can't adult that day.
Fair enough. It's a choice.
Yes.
A healthy choice.
Thank you for saying that, because yes, I've had to come to terms with the fact that sometimes I just do need that, and I must stop feeling guilty about that.
Yeah, and I imagine that comes with a lot of guilt when you're a high achiever who wants to do this and you've got this huge mission and you want to do it as soon as possible. But we know that for you, sustainability is going to be key. You've got to do it safely and make healthy choices so you're in it for the long haul.
Absolutely. But it's funny how as I've unpeeled layer by layer, what I'm realizing now is that some of my attitudes towards this and some of my beliefs towards resting come from, do I deserve this? Do I deserve the opportunity to rest? Do I even deserve abundance? And I've realized now that I'm now strong enough to face what's happened to me prior to the heart attack. So that was a process of living in South Africa and feeling incredibly unsafe, having friends hijacked, friends of friends murdered while I was still living in South Africa, knowing that I couldn't drive at night, having, and I can't, I'm stuttering now because it's obviously still stuff that's hard, driving my kids to school and being stuck in a riot and having my kids ask me, why are all those people on the side of the road holding bottles and sticks and driving over broken glass and through fire pit areas, like where there was fires, and crying and trying not to let the kids know that I'm crying, and phoning my husband quite calmly and going, I'm just driving down this road right now and it seems to be that there's a lot of people here, you know, and that was horrific. And stalling my car when some men came out of the bush and were pushing my car. Like, I didn't know what was going to happen. I managed to drive away. Other times, it was burning logs being thrown in front of my car on a highway and having to swerve to miss them. And knowing that if I had been hit, that was the end.
Yeah.
And I needed to get my family out of South Africa. And I knew it had to be done. And just that process of letting my mum know, the mum and dad, you know, were leaving. And
a huge decision again, not recognizing at the time, it was just you did what you had to do. But another choice point that with the benefit of hindsight after having this significant health challenge, it's now brought up now that you're safe and you're healed enough to deal with it and you've done the mindset work, it's going to release a lot of these past traumas for you to start to work through.
Yeah. And that's still, I mean, that's an ongoing process, right?
Definitely.
After the heart attack went out, I had the cardiac rehab was really good, although it was during COVID. So I didn't necessarily get to do some of the whole process of cardiac rehab. But the psychologist I was working with identified potentially post-traumatic stress disorder from South Africa, not necessarily just from the heart attack and what I went through in that process. So yeah, it's been a journey, but one that was necessary to get me here. So I think that's a really important and key thing I don't think I would have ever appreciated about my life in South Africa. And being here is such a gift. Being in Australia is such a gift. The heart attack is a gift. It was necessary for my healing. It was necessary for my future and my family's future. And it was necessary for me to find myself again. Who am I? What do I want out of life? What can I do in this world? How can I help? And I'm excited. I dream now. I can see, I have this knowing about the future And I'm just so blessed with every single day.
Oh, I love this for you. And just watching you as we talking and as you talked about that, you lit up. Like the whole room lights up when you tap into who you are, what you're here for, and your bigger purpose. So you've talked a lot about number of choice points. How would you say the experiences you've had, looking back now with all of them in a series, how have they transformed your perspective on life, on relationships, or your personal values?
Gosh, it's made me even more appreciative of relationship and connection.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons maybe why you and I have connected so deeply so quickly, is that I had a lot of social anxiety growing up. I didn't connect very easily with people at school. I found school really, really tricky. And since I've been in Australia and since I've been able to start doing this work, I just appreciate every single second of connection.
Mm.
And that's been such a gift and a blessing. So, I'll huddle with my friends. I'll sit close to them. I'll put my hands on their legs. I'll give them a hug. I'll share myself with people a lot more openly and a lot more freely. And that's so important for that connection with other women around us.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it's really, really highlighted just how important relationship and connection is. And that connection that I had with that mum in hospital, that mum of the autistic child, highlighted also just how important it is to listen. Then
potentially changed her world.
totally
In that conversation, but she changed your world. Everything changed for you when you recognize that.
Yes, yes. So being open enough to receive that message.
Absolutely.
And I don't believe I was there. And now I see opportunity everywhere, even more. And I don't mean opportunity for me. I just mean opportunity and life and the richness of it all around me. And I also don't believe I was in that. Not to the same degree.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's opened when you're brave enough to look. You can open it up and you can see.
Yes. And it's amazing what you see when you start looking through those new lenses and different eyes.
Yeah. No, it really, really is. And then I could see a kindred spirit in you.
Of course.
Which causes it facing.
Exactly. And us walking, climbing to the top of the Harbour Bridge last year, something neither of us thought we would physically be able to do. However we did it. And I remember us nearly getting blown off at the top because it was so windy as we hugged and held onto each other for dear life and kept saying, "You are my sunshine," on the top of the Harbour Bridge.
And you and I, of course, put at the front because we are the ones with the
health issues.
So they could keep an eye on us. And I think we were the ones having the most fun. That's why
that was fabulous.
The Harbour Bridge. Who would have thought?
Exactly. And again, it just goes to show that the mindset shifts can be so significant, because who would ever have thought 3 years ago that after what happened to you, you could climb to the top of the Harbour Bridge?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And whilst it was there, we took that choice, you and I did, we took that choice to go anyway.
Exactly.
Do it anyway, even though of course I was scared.
Of course. And it was a risk.
Yep.
But it was a risk that we were able to manage. And I think that's what you've already shown us in the story that you've given us so far, that you have had risks along the way and things have come up, but you've worked out ways to navigate that and manage them as safely and as healthily as possible. Not always getting it right, but...
You make it sound like a perfect process, but absolutely
no.
I don't messy one. I look like everything's all in a row, and there's quite a few swift things, a few ducks that are turned the wrong way, and there's one that's gone wayward, but
some fly off occasionally.
line you up again. And let's remind myself, let's remind us where we're going.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's not an exact thing, but I appreciate that I can even laugh about it. And then
Absolutely.
and I know how to bring it down.
Yeah.
And not let it get away with me.
And you're certainly really aware of the signs and what to look for now, and really attuned to that because you're really clear on who you are and your identity in the world.
Getting there.
Yeah.
Maybe it's getting there.
Absolutely. And, it's going to continue to evolve anyway. As you grow, it'll evolve. So, do you think that there's any specific qualities or personal attributes that you see as being key for moving through trauma into post-traumatic growth?
I think being able to look up at the sky and see the silver lining.
Mhm.
And all through, even before this major trauma, or not if you can even classify trauma in different categories because all trauma is trauma.
Mm.
Before I appreciated what it was for me back in the days of South Africa, for example, I always had this saying in my head that there is a silver lining everywhere. And you just need to look for it because it's there. There is a silver lining everywhere. And it's usually just starting with the glimpse of the silver lining until you can bring yourself forward to the place where you can actually know deep in your heart that the silver lining is there.
Mm-hmm.
So my advice would be look for that silver lining. There always is one. And
Love
keeping
that.
focus on that.
Look for that silver lining. Kerry's words of wisdom. I love that. And like you said, you'll get a glimpse and it's not going to always reveal itself and be bright and shiny. It's sometimes going to take us a little bit longer to sift through all the other stuff and the messiness to find it, but it is there.
So you need to have that trust and that knowing that it is.
So an inner trust
Mm-hmm.
and an inner knowing. So they're personal things that are within us if we can tap into them.
If we can tap into them. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm just so grateful I was able to tap into mine.
Mm. Yeah. And do you think that there was a specific process of doing that, or do you think it just sort of showed itself and you just knew to jump on it? It was a gut response?
Yeah. It's tricky because I think these days there's so much noise that hides our gut response.
Yes.
And I've had to sort of, through my work, also understanding the process of the fact that there is a gut response and that that's something we can trust. And everyone's heard about trust your gut. And usually your gut response is the right response. And that's because that's your inner knowing speaking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So through my learnings, that's what I've learned. And now I can put that more firmly into words. But, I think it's still hard for me to identify what it is about myself that has been the key ingredient. Yeah. So because so many things come up, but I'm like, I don't know what that key ingredient was that I've always had. Maybe I should talk to my parents and ask them, what did you see in me, when I was little? Because we all have those experiences. And some of my key ones were things that have been forgotten at school or being put into a new school. And I was one of 3 Kerrys. And at new school, and every time the teacher went, Kerry, I was like, is that me? And he thought it might be me, all of that kind of process. But still, there was something in me that kept me, and as much as I wanted to hide and avoid, and that's been a strong part of growing up, there was always this little spark inside, little spark that just kept me going and kept me strong.
Yeah. And I know earlier, and I wrote down the words you use, and I thought, there are other little breadcrumbs that will lead us to the things that are important to share. You use
I know you love your breadcrumbs.
I know. I love my breadcrumbs. They're very important and they're always there when we know to look.
Yes. And of course,
When
that's what I've been doing. Yeah. I've been
Totally.
looking at those breadcrumbs and putting them together and then realizing I need to go further back and then realizing I need to go further back. At this point, I'm working on my first 7 years, of course.
Yes.
Our first 7 years, those are where these stories come from and how we play things out. So, yeah, that's an important.
The 3 words that stood out for me earlier were strength, fortitude, and determination.
Yeah.
So how does that, when I say that back to you now, how does that feel?
It fits.
Mm,
Certainly the determination and the fortitude fit.
Yeah.
The strength does, but I didn't believe it until after the heart attack. And even then, I mean, on Saturday, it'll be 3 years.
mm,
And I know that strength was key in getting me here.
Yeah.
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 And of course, strength for me comes from a place of trust and security as a foundation.
Mm.
And that's why for me, it's been wobbly, especially with my personal safety in South Africa. And of
Definitely.
course, there's always the financial stuff for security. Because in South Africa, you have to be financially secure to be physically safe. And so that's always tied together for me as well. But I've got behind me the most incredibly supportive husband you could ever imagine. Like we call him my COE, my chief officer of everything. Because he literally, nothing is too much trouble for him. Nothing is beneath him. He will do whatever he can to champion me while I champion. And he sees that as one of his roles, is that he's helping children as well.
Oh,
Through the work that
absolutely.
we do together and how he is my rock.
Mm.
And in so many ways, my security. But at the same time, I mean, I say that, but at the same time, I also know that I am an independent person. And whilst I don't need to have him in my life, I want him and what he brings for me in my life.
And
It's
you made that choice because, as you said, you split.
Yeah.
But you did the inner work and all the personal stuff you needed to do to be able to give more of you
Mm.
in a healthy way to each other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to rebalance that out to, we want this. We don't
Absolutely.
necessarily need it because that places us in a really insecure place.
Mm.
We want this and we're choosing this. And we've chosen each other again. And 25 years we've been married.
Oh, how fabulous. Congratulations.
Yeah, well, 25 years next year.
Oh.
But yeah, just the strength from within and the strength from a strong relationship has been really important. And strength from my friendships. I've got some very, very strong friendships and relationships and very secure relationships with my children. And all of that has been instrumental. And again, in choice points to make those relationships.
And
Yeah.
by having those strong, secure, trusting relationships, you're then able to build better relationships in the work you do with these kids. Because I know, and I'd love you to share it, that you have a very big mission, Kerry.
Yes.
Please share your mission with our listeners and with the world, because you blow me away every day with this, but you are taking massive steps towards your mission.
Yes, I am. So when Haley said to me, put a number on it, as in how many children, my goal, my mission, well, my vision, let's say, is to help over 1 million children through my company, SenseUp. And at the moment, I'm doing that with upskilling and supporting occupational therapists to be able to support the mum and the child. So with increased understanding, and sometimes it just takes a little shift in a therapist's understanding. So you don't need to go and do big, long trainings of 2 or 3 years. Sometimes something. Like I had a student recently say to me that she's got a child who, from something she learned from something I taught her, she identified, oh, I wonder if this child has gravitational insecurity because she's having trouble walking down the stairs at school. And so she went back to the webinar I did on that and reviewed what she could add and what richness she could bring to her therapy sessions. 2-3 weeks later, the child is now walking down the stairs at school. But with the difference that's made in that child's life is that down those stairs was the playground that she couldn't access before. Now she's got the confidence to go down the stairs and play in the playground with her friends.
Oh,
Now that has changed that child's life. And that is what lights me up.
oh, absolutely.
Yes.
That's why you do what you do, and that's just one child.
Absolutely. That's
And
just one child. And
you
every
want to
OT,
change so many more things.
yes, because every OT that learns from me at that moment in time generally has between 30 and 50 children on their caseload that they're
Oh,
responsible.
definitely. Yes,
And that's just in one moment in time. That same OT in her career sees thousands of children.
definitely.
So it all stacks up, it all compounds. What I teach in OT, she shares with a colleague, she shares with a mother, she shares with a teacher. And before you know it, there's a ripple effect of children who are getting more understanding and support. So the mission is to assist people to have a deeper understanding and therefore offer a more intuitive level of support to sensory children. Because if sensory children can feel safe, they'll fly. As we can see, just with what we're doing with our lives.
Absolutely.
All need to feel understood and supported, every human on earth,
Definitely.
and help sensory children.
Such a wonderful, wonderful mission. And as we know, there's more and more sensory
Absolutely.
children, more and more of us, more adults that have identified these sensory issues.
Absolutely. And as things change, like particularly around early years of when babies are born and those first early years, whether they're getting enough movement or whether they're laying on the floor enough to develop those muscles, whether they've been exposed to enough play. I mean, as it is, many of our children with disabilities have challenges and barriers to the full range of sensory play, including things like swimming and climbing and tumbling and running and different textures and tactile inputs. But that's happening with all children these days.
Definitely.
So there's very few children who have fully integrated all of their sensory areas. And we need sensory integration of our vision, of our sight, of our sound, of our touch, in order to know how to act in the world and how to participate in your environment. And the challenges are just enormous. So as a society, we need to start thinking about how we can support children from birth all the way through.
Yes, it's never too early, is it? The earlier we get it, the more impact we can have.
Completely.
So a huge mission, but I just know that if anyone will achieve their mission, it is you.
Well, I've been called. I was saying,
You have. You got a very clear message. You heard your calling loud and clear, and you have followed through and taken action on it. So what more?
I was so grateful for it.
Oh, absolutely.
Just so grateful. Yeah.
So that sense of gratitude.
Yeah.
Yeah. A real gift in the trauma.
Yeah.
And I know that, as I've been talking to a number of wonderful guests that have come on, that has become loud and clear that there have been lessons, learnings, and ultimately massive gifts as a result of the traumas that we've gone through.
Absolutely.
So, Kerry, as we move to wrapping up this conversation, where can our listeners find out more about you and find you online? Because I know after hearing your story and about your mission, they're going to be absolutely wanting to find you.
So my training company is www.sensup.org. And I train occupational therapists online as well as in live workshops. So I've got workshops coming up in Perth, Sydney, and Gold Coast and Melbourne in the next few months, which will be really exciting. And then I also run a therapy practice. So through telehealth and through face-to-face therapy, children can come to senseuptherapies.au if they're interested in even just talking about how can they find an occupational therapist in their local area who has additional training in sensory integration therapy or sensory-based therapy.
Fantastic. And we'll put all those things in the show notes and make sure that we make it as easy as possible for everyone to find you, because I just know that you will continue to impact thousands and thousands and easily get to that million.
Yeah, absolutely. And when they go to our website, they'll find occupational therapists who've done additional sensory training in a directory in their local area. So that's, again, it's growing. I'm trying to grow the number of OTs who's got further sensory understanding. So parents listening to this can go on there and find the directory of the occupational therapist.
Fantastic. Yes. Oh, thank you. You are an absolute gift and blessing yourself. And I am so grateful that you agreed to come onto the podcast and that we've had the chance to chat today. Thank you, Kerry.
Well, I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to spend some time with you and to talk to your listeners and to share my story.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nat.
Bye for now. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Growing Tall Poppies. It is my deepest hope that today's episode may have inspired and empowered you to step fully into your post-traumatic growth so that you can have absolute clarity around who you are, what matters the most to you, and to assist you to release your negative emotions and regulate your nervous system so you can fully thrive. New episodes are published every Tuesday, and I hope you'll continue to join us as we explore both the strategies and the personal qualities required to fully live a life of post-traumatic growth and to thrive. So if it feels aligned to you and really resonates, then I invite you to hit subscribe, and it would mean the world to us if you could share this episode with others who you feel may benefit too. You may also find me on Instagram at Growing Tall Poppies and Facebook, Dr. Natalie Green. Remember, every moment is an opportunity to look for the lessons and to learn and increase your ability to live the life you desire and deserve. So for now, stay connected, stay inspired, stand tall like the tall poppy you are, and keep shining your light brightly in the world. Bye for now.